Welcome to the Real News Network. Again, we're in Pittsburgh with the President of the United Steelworkers, Leo Gerard. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, Leo, the other major piece of legislation that the trade union movement wanted out of the Obama presidency was something called the Employee Free Choice Act. Unionization in the private sector in the United States, if I have my numbers correctly, or something like about 7.2%. If you put in the public sector, it might get to about 11%. I think by far the lowest in the industrialized world. Where are we at with that legislation? Because the gossip, the rumor mill in Washington, is that it's actually dead, that there's too many conservative Democrats that aren't going to support it, and that Obama's not going to stick his neck out on it. So where do you think we're at in the process, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, let me correct you first of all. It's not only the lowest rate of unionization in the industrialized world, it's one of the lowest rates of unionization even in the developing world. It's lower than Mexico and Brazil, as an example. It's lower than South Africa. If we think about that in those terms, it's a disgrace to this country. And in fact, I would argue that part of the reason that we have the economic collapse in this country is because the rate of unionization is such that too many people are left out of the ability to bargain for a share of the wealth that they help create or the service they help provide. So that's been a big, I think.
And connect that to the economic crisis.
And that connects to the economic crisis. America has the largest disparity between the rich and the rest of society of any major OECD country, and the largest disparity since the Great Depression. So the dots are connected that way. When it comes to the Employee Free Choice Act, one of my huge disappointments is that once again the Republicans mischaracterized the legislation, and Democrats were too slow off the mark to make it, to break the myth. And they ran with the myth that the Employee Free Choice Act somehow diminishes someone's right to a secret ballot vote, which is the absolute unmitigated lie of that piece of legislation. What the Employee Free Choice Act really does is take the choice away from the employer about how the election would or not be conducted, would be or would not be conducted, and it puts it where it belongs, with the workers. In no other major industrial country does the employer decide if there'll be an election or not, how it will conduct itself. Workers make that choice. So we failed in the party of getting out in advance of that. When it comes to...
Let me interrupt you for a sec. Failed, or is it because a section of the party doesn't want this legislation?
No, I think that it was a failure of the political system. The leadership are with us, and the leadership have been very supportive. And in fact, during the campaign, President Obama made it really clear. He's made it very clear since he's become president a number of different times that he believes the right to choose a union is the workers' right, and that collective bargaining is an important part of any democracy.
I was one of the leaders in fighting to pass the Employee Free Choice Act. That's why I'm fighting for it in the Senate, and that's why I will sign that bill when I become President of the United States of America.
Again, you deal within the political realm that we've got, and I think that Arlen Specter's breaking with the bill that he had spent so much time helping to co-sponsor and helping to shape originally, gave some Democrats a chance to walk off the plank with him. And our job is to bring them back. I'm not really comfortable with where we are.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some critique from ordinary union stewards and members in Detroit quite recently, actually, that they don't feel like the union leadership as a whole is, and I know there's exceptions to that, and they make exceptions, there are some leaders, but they don't feel the union movement as a whole has actually fought itself hard enough for this, that they don't seem to be out there swinging.
Well, it depends where they're watching the swinging. We don't have to swing in Detroit. Both senators are totally for us, and we know that the overwhelming majority of the members of the House vote on this passed by the last time by 248 votes or something. It was an overwhelming majority. What the labor movement has been trying to do is focus on those that are wavering, focus on Republicans that are seen as middle of the road, like Arlen Specter was, like Snow and Collins were. We've got a few other senators in the Republican Party that were sort of, we thought would be moderately doable. And we're focusing in on some Democrats. I think Blanche Lincoln, as an example, is an important senator that has to come our way. We've got some other senators that have to come our way. So if you're in a Feinstein, Senator Feinstein has to come our way. Senator Feinstein got on to the business of, she was uncomfortable with the arbitration provision. Well, you know what? When it comes to trial lawyers, the Republican Party is, we got to go to arbitration. But when it comes to the labor movement, they don't want us to go to arbitration.
And the arbitration is a very important part of this piece. Explain what that is.
The reason that the arbitration provision is so important is the way I characterize the whole labor law environment in America. You don't have the right to join a union. You have the right to try. And the employer has the right to do anything they want with minimal sanctions to prevent you from joining. But if a majority of workers have gone through that process and survived the torture of that process and have chosen a union, then you don't have a right to a collective agreement. You have the right to try and get a collective agreement, and the employer has the right to do anything they want to stop you. And so a third-year law student can bargain on the edge of an unfair labor practice for 2 or 3 years. But then if they commit an unfair labor practice, then you can be in the labor board and the courts for another 10 years. So by following the process, we've had employers tell workers, we'll follow the process, but you won't get a collective agreement for 10 years.
So how does this new
and the courts will say that's not a violation because they're just telling the truth.
And how will this legislation change
What this legislation says is that you bargain meaningfully for a specified period of time, and if you can't reach an agreement, then it's submitted to an arbitrator. And the arbitrator will be able to choose which way. You can have what I call baseball arbitration, choose one agreement over the other, one proposal over the other, or you can have a system whereby the arbitrator would say, okay, you're out of line on this, you're out of line on that, but you're okay on this, you're okay on that, and it could shape the agreement based on the individual presentations of the two parties. What that does, in fairness, what that does is force both parties to come to an agreement. That's all. Come to an agreement. Now, the hypocrisy of this is the Republicans in particular, but also Feinstein and a few other Democrats are opposed to that, yet they're all in favor of it when it comes to trial lawyers. Instead of going to court, they want trial lawyers to go to arbitration. Well, workers don't get a chance. What workers do is they don't get a collective agreement. They don't get the union they fought to get, had to survive to get, had to go through, almost walk on broken glass to get, if you look at a caricature of how you try to get to a union in America.
So are you convinced that the preponderance of union leadership will go to the wall on this legislation?
Look, I think that from the role that I get to play at the AFL-CIO and in the coordinating committee that we've put together to try and bring unification back to the labor movement, the major unions that are committed to this legislation, and we're fighting hard. In places like Arkansas, we've had events. Use Arlen Specter as an example. He said to us one day, well, I'm not getting many letters from the labor movement. So he said, well, Arlen, if it's letters you want, we can. So we put the word out. Within 2 weeks, got 38,000 letters. So, you know, people want this legislation. People understand that you need to rebuild the labor movement so you can reestablish collective bargaining so you can help fix the economy. We need an economy that works for everybody.
And you get a sense that President Obama will spend some significant amount of his capital on this, because he's mentioned the legislation, as far as I can track, only once since he actually got elected, which is at the New Mexico town hall. When he was asked about it, he said he supported it.
So there's a bill called the Employee Free Choice Act that would try to even out the playing field. And what it would essentially say is that if a majority of workers at a company want a union, then they can get a union without delay, and some of the monkey business that's done right now to prevent them from having a union. Now, I want to give the other side of the argument. Businesses object to some of the provisions in the Employee Free Choice Act because one of the things that's in there is something called card check, where rather than have a secret ballot and organize a big election, you could simply have enough employees, a majority of employees, check a card, and that would then form the union. and the employers argue we need to have a secret ballot. I think that there may be areas of compromise to get this bill done. I'm supportive of it, but there aren't enough votes right now in the Senate to get it passed. And what I think we have to do is to find ways in which the core idea of the Employee Free Choice Act is preserved, which is how do we make it easier for people who want to form a union to at least get a vote and have an even playing field. How do we do that, but at the same time get enough votes to pass the bill? That's what we're working on right now.
And one can understand he can't fight on every front at the same time. But do you get a sense that he's going to, at some point, he's going to come out swinging on this?
Look, I would hope my answer to those kinds of questions is that at this point I believe in him. I trust his values, but I also am a combination of sympathetic and nervous. I don't think there's a president in the history of this country in the last 150 years, maybe Abraham Lincoln, I don't know, that's inherited as big a mess as this guy inherited. Every single piece of the economic equation is broken. So I understand that turmoil. I also understand that on two fundamental issues, this president will be judged. And one of them is, did he fight for the Employee Free Choice Act? Because the labor movement and working people all across, and even people who aren't in unions but want to be, fought for him to become president because they want to have the right, not the right to try, but the right to form a union. And the other thing that's going to be a factor in his next election and the election of the Democratic Party will be the quality of health care reform. Those are two big things. And I think at some point he's going to have to spend political capital on both of those.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on the Real News Network.